Hi everybody, I'm here with Olivia Wong, who is the General Manager, Environmental and Social Responsibility for MTR Corporation. Olivia, welcome.
Thank
Very
you.
excited to have a chance to kind of speak to you today about your role at MTR, but more specifically around integration of ESG and DE&I and all these different aspects. But do you mind maybe introducing yourself to our learners and kind of explaining what MTR does?
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. So MTR, I hope that for at least our audience in Hong Kong that knows that it is a public transport company. It is we get people from A to B safely and it's exceptionally accessible. We have over 99 stations in Hong Kong, so then to make sure we get people around. Our mode in terms of making sure that we keep cities moving, and from my perspective, working in the environmental and social responsibility team is to get cities moving sustainably. And that's basically what I do every single day in MTR.
Yeah, and so one thing that's been a recurring theme in this program so far is, because this is ESG Essentials, right? It's the idea is providing introduction, et cetera. And so for a lot of people, these concepts are relatively new, or at least the way we characterize them or define them, or the terminology we use is a little bit new. And therefore, a lot of the roles that people have are also relatively new. But you've kind of been in this space for a long time, not just at MTR, at prior organizations as well. And we're going to get more into kind of DE&I and other things that you've been. But can you kind of like describe like your journey into this space and how it happened? Because it seems like you're like an early pioneer, at least in Hong Kong, on a lot of these issues.
Well, yeah. So then I walk into ESG in a way by accident, I think, and also thanks to my boss in terms of giving me the trust and asking me to come and work for her in MTR. So before I actually joined MTR, I spent my career working for a conglomerate. So I worked for the Swire Group in Hong Kong. They own a business in aviations, in properties, they are bottlers. So I have a general management background, and so kind of really understanding in terms of how to make sure that we are able to operate in a sustainable, and also in terms of making sure that we're able to generate a revenue to keep an organization going. My very last role actually coming in before joining MTR was actually it is specifically looking at DEI. Now, the environmental piece, funny enough, is that my neighbor in the office is actually the sustainability team.
Okay.
And so then they are the one that's responsible for looking at the environmental sustainabilities of the Swire Group. And it was such a privilege to having them as my next door neighbor, because at the end of the day, we have a lot of conversations around, we're often wondering, why is it that most organizations will separate their environmental side and a social side in a way that where they will be reporting into two different lines,
right,
or two different management. And so then we said, at the end of the day, as we look at what's actually happening in the world around climate change, in terms of extreme weather, often when these kind of natural disaster happens, who are actually being impacted the most? People that are most vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Those that do not actually, within the society, have the ability to avoid or to mitigate these kind of issues. They are the one that's being hardest hit. And often they are also the one that's keeping the cities moving as well.
Yeah.
And so then as we have more and more these conversations, I start to get a lot more interested. And when the opportunity arises in MTR to say, hey, we actually believe that we should bring the environmental and social piece together so that we can have a holistic view of what this actually means for the society, I thought, wow, what a great opportunity, let me have a go at it.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to pull together a few things that you just said. One is kind of that general manager background. The other is you're now given this opportunity to pull these different ideas together. The reality is that there has to be a roadmap. And generally speaking, there are going to be KPIs and specific guideposts, goals, et cetera, in kind of executing a strategy like that. So how can a company create KPIs in the execution of an ESG-related strategy, whether it's focused on sustainability or social, separately, or whether it's something like what you had to do, which is slightly more complicated and actually like pulling these different areas together?
Yeah, so then I think one of the most important things that so it's great that MTR has is that there's a very clear purpose. Why is it we're doing this? So the organization actually have put together an environmental and social responsibility strategy, a proper ESG strategy in terms of having the 3 environmental and social objectives. So that's very clear because you do need to know where is that you want to go in order to know how to get there. So we have on the environmental side in terms of the greenhouse gas emission reduction. On the social side, we have social inclusion. We also have advancement opportunities. Under these 3 objectives, we have 10 very clear commitment in terms of how is it to help us to get there. Now, having all of this, that's great. You know, every company have strategy. We know that that's what we need to do. Now, I guess the question is that then how do we actually make sure that we can get to that sort of the North Star, you know, the end point. So having those clear KPI is important. So that means, you know, it's kind of like every individuals, you know, you have your performance review. You know that every year what you actually need to achieve in terms of your key objectives. And so that we have these key performance indicators that will help us every year to help us move us closer to our ultimate environmental and social objectives. These KPIs are discussed every year in the beginning of the year with all the different business units because again, you know, as a department, we are there to kind of understand, explain the strategy, knowing what it is that and how to get there. But we can't be the one that's doing everything,
right?
Because that's not how an organization works. We're going to have different departments. They're all going to contribute toward the objectives. And so what we do is that we actually have very long and robust conversations with each of the department, going through in terms of, because we have again, we go back to, we have very clear environmental and social objectives and commitments that we know we need to make. Then we ask in terms of the short, so for example, within a year, to a medium, within 2 to 3 years, to a longer term objective. In terms of how it is that we're going to help us to get to that endpoint. And so we have conversations around that. So for example, you know, on the side of social, we look at is that, you know, as MTR, we want to make sure that we are, as a public transport, that anyone can get safely from A to B. So then one of the things that we have what we call universal basic mobilities. So that's one of our social inclusion objectives. And so we said, okay, so every year, you know, objective is that we're going to introduce between 1 to 2 new initiatives that actually going to help our customers to fulfill their journey. And so, you know, we create things like MTR Care apps that, for example, help the elderly, where we simplify the applications that we have on MTR to make the words larger, simpler to navigate, or people with disabilities, for example, that require wheelchair services. So then the apps were actually able to help them to order in terms of ramps at an earlier time, and also to check which elevators is free, so then they actually easy for them to get to the platform. So I think a lot of these things is that where you do need to have those kind of conversations with each of the individual business units and understanding and knowing that this is where we need to get to in terms of our objective and our commitments and what it is that we need to do every step of the way to help us to get there. And so I think and it has to be very open and transparent, but it also has to be a give and take. So it can't be just because we said, well, you know, we have a commitment and you're going to have to get there. And I don't care how. And then so, well, that's not going to work. So you really need to have that kind of conversation and a bit of a give and take, and sometimes a bit of nudging and say, can we be a little bit more aggressive in our targets to help us move faster, to help us think differently. So these are some of the things that we do in terms of making sure that we can actually look at the different different sets of KPIs every year. So just in 2024, we have 43 KPIs. In 2023, we had 44 KPIs. It's not a matter of the number, but it's just really kind of breaking down into the different sort of performance indicator to help us to navigate and making sure that we can achieve those objectives.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, one of the main, I guess, questions or concerns that I get in terms of pushback for ESG related things when I'm doing corporate training and stuff is that there will be a code of conduct or other types of external ESG or various types of publicly stated goals. And when I'm training the actual staff, they'll say, this is not part of my KPIs. This is not part of how I'm being measured for promotion. This is not part of my bonus or my salary considerations. And so I think, you know, one of the things that my takeaways from this is how integrating ESG strategies is not just about kind of public statements or disclosures or even goal setting, because we have to have an integration of these things, even to the point of potentially, where appropriate, having incentives that kind of get to the core of your staff and what they're doing. Yeah, thank you for that. It's really interesting.